morning, good afternoon, good evening. Yesterday, I posted a video in which I was discussing uh, and pointing out that this proposed challenge by Chamisa and company that SADC should revisit the 2023 election is a waste of time. The response I got was varied, but I just picked this particular one. The main argument there is that we should form a new party. I should form a new party in this case. I've dealt with this subject before, but I think it is well worth visiting again. Zimbabwe at one point had no fewer than 130 different political parties. 130. That has not stopped the country becoming a failed state. So forming a party is not the solution. The solution is educating the voters. As long as we have an electorate that is so naive and so gullible that they are easily conned into believing an idiotic lie like what Chamisa promised them last year, that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, the country will go nowhere. So I re-emphasize the point. It is not forming more political parties that will get Zimbabwe out of this mess. It is educating the voters, the electorate. The Greeks said it right. They are the ones who gave mankind democracy, a government of the people, for the people, by the people. Those people will not be the government unless they are educated, unless they are knowledgeable, and unless they are diligent to hold those in public office to account. If they're not educated and knowledgeable, they'll never hold those in public office to account. So the emphasis must be that the electorate must be educated. One of the problems we have in Zimbabwe is the failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections. This has been at the heart of our problem. We now have had 44 years since independence, and ZANU-PF has been rigging elections ever since for the last 44 years. In the last 24 of those years, they've managed to rig elections with the connivance of the MDC/CCC. And this is where we get stuck. We have got to break out of that. The 2008 elections, in my view, were the watershed. In it, the March vote was probably the nearest we've ever got to free, fair, and credible elections, because SADC had put enormous pressure on ZANU-PF to make sure that that March vote was transparent and free and fair. When the counting of the votes started and ZANU-PF realized that they were losing the vote, the party was very quick to stop the counting, and Mnangagwa himself took over. And the recounting of 5 million votes was to take the next 6 weeks. Of course, he wasn't really recounting. They were just corrupting the vote. And Morgan Trankirai, who had won the March vote, his vote was whittled down to 47%, enough to force a runoff. And during the runoff, the country was to face some of the worst electoral violence that the country had ever seen. This is a video clip of Mnangagwa boasting of his role in that election.
2008 patakaita ma-elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent ya president. Ma-results abuda tiri party headquarters vamutasa vanga vari secretary vedu ve-administration vamutasa muripi ndafona ndiri kwarusapi kombo kuenda kwarusapi seka ma-results achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo Mnangagwa ndezvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose watofunga kuti zani yadini yaparara. President ofona zvakamira sei kati ndomamira zvakaita takatodini katida sei manje mama ndikati abvudzai baba nditaure navo baba gadzirai politburo cabinet musarangarira zvimwe zvipi gadzirai chi cabinet asi nangoda kuti muzive kuti 2008 ma-results abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vesa vari kuma below 35, they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusurufaro. We know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We are going to act as we see it fit. We are prepared to go the whole distance.
The most important thing is that after those elections, SADC and the AU could not pretend those were free, fair, and credible elections. They forced ZANU-PF to sign the Global Political Agreement of 2008, which gave rise to the GNU, the Government of National Unity, of 2008 to 2018. The primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms so that ZANU-PF would restore and respect the freedoms and basic human rights of all citizens, including respecting the people's right to a meaningful vote. That is at the heart of the GNU. Why even now, with the benefit of hindsight, so many Zimbabweans still fail to understand that beggars belief. An electorate that is failing to understand that is a problem, because that is the basis of good governance. The tragedy is that the opposition were easily bribed by Robert Mugabe, so that for the entire 5 years of the GNU, they failed to implement even one token reform. Not even one token reform. And this has been the problem. That was the golden opportunity for Zimbabwe to end this case of rigged elections and bad governance. And we failed to implement even one reform. Worse still, the opposition has been participating in elections post the GNU debacle, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they're giving ZANU-PF legitimacy. Here is a quotation I've taken out from David Coulter. He was not the only one to admit this, but this is one. At the bottom of your screen there is the full quotation. I'll just take in two extracts from that. The first part is the 2013 electoral process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw. With no reforms implemented, ZANU-PF was able to rig the 2013 elections just as they had rigged the 2008 elections. And the process was so flawed and so illegal that the only logical step was to withdraw. He was absolutely right there. Why some people have struggled to understand that beggars belief. How can you fail to understand that? That is self-evident. The process is so flawed, so illegal. The only logical step is to withdraw. And some people have failed to understand that. The second part of it is to ask, why did David Coulter and company fail to withdraw? And he explains it. The full quotation is there, but I've just taken the last bit of it. They did not withdraw for fear that the other, that is MDCT and /MDCTN, would remain in the elections, winning seats. In other words, they knew the process is flawed. They knew the process is illegal, and that the only logical step was to withdraw. And yet they would not do so out of greed. Of course, ZANU-PF knew that the MDC guys are corrupt and would not resist the bait. Ever since the 2008, ZANU-PF had learned that it could not get away with the old one-party state. It needed to create a facade that Zimbabwe was a multi-party democracy. And as long as the opposition had any hope of winning a few gravy train seats, they'll be tempted to participate. And as long as they participate, the regime will maintain the facade that Zimbabwe is a healthy and functioning multi-party democracy. And so they were going after the few gravy train seats ZANU-PF was dangling. And the last bit of it, by participating, David Coulthard is also admitting that participating was giving the process credibility. Yeah, giving the electoral process credibility. In other words, you're giving ZANU-PF, vote rigging ZANU-PF legitimacy. So it comes back to the same point where you're saying yourself, and if the electorate understood that, they would have been asking ZANU-PF, their MDC supporters or leaders, why are we keeping on participating in these flawed elections? When we know that they are flawed, and that participating will only give ZANU-PF legitimacy. And in this case here, the silent bit which the MDC leaders, CCC leaders, have been silent about is not to tell their supporters the truth, that they're participating out of greed. So they've sought to hide that by talking about, oh, we have got strategies now of how to win rigged elections. And so the country has been participating in these elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, but because they believed the opposition had got strategies to win rigged elections. Last year was the classical one. Chamisa insisted in participating in the flawed elections, insisting that he has plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. Of course, we know he had not plugged any vote rigging loopholes. He was just lying. And the problem comes in, why is it that people were so naive and gullible that they believed those lies? Tim Pachelu had already done an analysis of the voters' roll and had condemned it because of these blatant flaws in it. And so insisting on a verified voters' roll was the most rational, logical thing to do. And yet, Chamisa and company were saying, oh, we are going to participate even without a verified voters' roll because I've plugged all the voting loopholes. How is it possible that people believe that? That is simply unbelievable. And yet people did believe it. And not just a few people, millions. No fewer than 2 million voted in those elections. And to say nothing of the horde, particularly in the diaspora, who cheered and applauded the participation in those flawed elections. Here is a short clip revealing Chamisa's problem as a liar.
Ende patakasangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Serious questions were raised about your behaviour in Washington, D.C. You did see some senior people on Capitol Hill, some Congress people, but you also claimed that you'd seen Donald Trump. You claimed you had a conversation with him in which you said he asked you how much you needed to move the country forward. You told him $15 billion, and he said to you that he would provide the money if you won the election. That was not true, was it?
Sangana na Trump akatibvunza naye akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
It was not true that you'd seen Donald Trump and that Donald Trump indicated to you that he would provide, if you won the election,
But
$15 billion.
All those statements were said by other people, not what I said.
Kasangana na Trump akatibvunza naye akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Well, no, because there is a video which shows you at a rally in January back home in Zimbabwe saying that Donald Trump had pretty much promised you $15 billion. To be clear, because some people in Zimbabwe are still confused, you're now telling me you did not meet Donald Trump.
We did not.
It is shocking that there are many Zimbabweans out there, even now, who still refuse to accept that Chamisa lied about plugging the vote-rigging loophole. This is one of the problems we've got. As long as we've got an electorate that is so naive that they refuse to accept reality, you always have a problem. We are facing 2028 elections. The chances are Chamisa is going to come back and say to the people, I have found another way of making sure that elections are free, fair, and credible. And so the people should follow me. And at the rate at which we are going, I wouldn't bet against it that the same 2 million will participate in the flawed 2028 elections and give ZANU-PF legitimacy again. The other problem we have is, of course, with the ZANU-PF itself. Many people still continue to support ZANU-PF because they believe in Mnangagwa's so-called Vision 2030. This cartoon represents the true Vision 2030. This is supposedly a staircase tower taking people to Vision 2030. And already we can see the supporters there supporting it because it is in danger of falling. Vision 2030 is a mirage. Mnangagwa has been in power for the last 7 years since taking over from Mugabe. And as we know, the economy has not improved. When he took over, he promised that Zimbabwe is open for business. And he was cocksure that there would be a floodgate of investors. But after 2 years, it finally dawned on him that investors were not easily fooled by that. And so he changed the tune. He talked of Zimbabwe will be built by Zimbabweans. Zimbabwe no vayo. And ever since, he's been insisting that Zimbabwe is on course to become an upper middle income country by 2030. So 7 years down the line, one would think there would be signs of economic recovery. There are none. If anything at all, corruption is worse than ever before. The roads are in a sorry state. Hospitals have no medicine. Schools, many of the country's qualified teachers have had to leave the country for greener pastures, particularly in the rural areas. The quality of education has gone down to the point where in some places, the schools will be very lucky to post 3% pass rate at grade 7, Form 2, Form 4, and Form 6. 3%. That's a joke. And yet, there are still some people out there who still continue to believe in Mnangagwa's promise of Zimbabwe will become an upper middle income nation by 2030. When you have got an electorate who are like that, you definitely have a problem. Because to believe such a blatant lie clearly shows that you really have not been paying attention. This is a joke of what somebody said. If you asked a day-old monkey what he thought of Vision 2030, this will be his reply. Thank you very much for joining me today, and have a good evening.